You know, there's something absolutely fascinating about the way our culture treats solitude. We've been conditioned, from the moment we can understand language, to believe that being alone is somehow a problem that needs to be solved. It's treated almost like a disease, a condition to be cured. And I want to suggest to you today that this is one of the most pernicious lies that society perpetuates, because the fear of being alone keeps people enslaved in ways they don't even begin to recognize. Let me start by asking you a simple question. Why is it that when you see someone eating alone in a restaurant, there's this immediate assumption that something must be wrong? Or when someone chooses to live without a partner, society immediately begins to worry about them, to pity them, to suggest that they must be lonely, must be missing out on something essential. What is this extraordinary prejudice against solitude? The answer, I think, is quite simple and quite disturbing. Society doesn't want you to be comfortable alone, because a person who is genuinely at peace with solitude is a person who cannot be controlled. Let me explain what I mean by this. You see, the entire structure of our civilization is built on making people dependent on external sources for their sense of well-being. The economy needs you to believe that happiness comes from purchasing things. The entertainment industry needs you to believe that fulfillment comes from constant stimulation. The institution of conventional relationships needs you to believe that you are incomplete without another person. And all of these systems fall apart the moment you discover that you are fundamentally complete as you are. A person who is comfortable being alone is a person who doesn't need to buy things to fill an inner void. They don't need constant entertainment to avoid facing themselves. They don't need to desperately cling to relationships out of fear of being by themselves. In other words, they are useless to a consumer society. They cannot be manipulated through their loneliness, their boredom, their sense of inadequacy. And this is why, from the earliest age, we are taught to fear solitude. Children are constantly encouraged to play with others, to socialize, to be part of groups. And while there's nothing wrong with social interaction in itself, what's interesting is that we never give equal emphasis to teaching children how to be content in their own company. A child who prefers to play alone is often viewed with concern. Parents worry, is something wrong? Why isn't my child more social? As if the capacity for solitude were a defect rather than a skill. Now, I'm not suggesting that human beings should become hermits, or that social connection isn't valuable. That would be absurd. We are, after all, social creatures in many respects. But what I am suggesting is that there's a profound difference between choosing to be with others from a place of wholeness and clinging to others from a place of fear. And our society has systematically destroyed our ability to tell the difference. Let me put this another way. When you cannot bear to be alone, when you need constant company, constant noise, constant distraction, what is it that you're running from? You're running from yourself. You're running from silence. You're running from the voice inside your own head. And society encourages this flight, because as long as you're running, you're consuming, you're conforming, you're remaining safely within the boundaries of what's expected. But here's what society doesn't want you to discover. Solitude is not loneliness. These are two entirely different states of being, though our culture deliberately confuses them. Loneliness is a feeling of lack, a sense that something is missing. It's painful, it's anxious, it's desperate. But solitude, true solitude, is something else entirely. Solitude is fullness, it's completeness. It's the recognition that you don't need anything outside yourself to be whole. The mystics have always understood this. The great spiritual teachers throughout history have regularly withdrawn into solitude. The Buddha sat alone under the Bodhi tree. Jesus went into the desert for 40 days. The Taoist sages retreated to their mountain hermitages. And why did they do this? Not because they hated people, but because they understood that in silence and solitude you can hear what gets drowned out by the constant noise of society. In solitude, you discover who you actually are beneath all the roles you've been playing, beneath all the masks you've been wearing. You discover what you actually think rather than what you've been told to think. You discover what you actually want rather than what advertising has convinced you to want. You discover your own rhythm, your own pace, your own nature. And this discovery is absolutely terrifying to a system that depends on your conformity. Think about it this way. Imagine a person who genuinely enjoys their own company, who finds their own thoughts interesting, who doesn't need external validation or constant social proof to feel valuable. This person is not going to spend money they don't have on things they don't need to impress people they don't like. This person is not going to stay in a toxic relationship simply because they can't face being alone. This person is not going to accept a soul-crushing job just for the status or the ability to afford a lifestyle that's supposed to signal success to others. A person comfortable with solitude is dangerous to the established order because they have found the secret that society works very hard to keep hidden. You don't need most of what you think you need. You don't need the constant approval of others. You don't need to fill every moment with activity and noise. You don't need to define yourself through your relationships, your possessions, your achievements. You are already something, someone, complete in yourself. Now, let me address what I think is a common misunderstanding. When I talk about solitude, I'm not talking about isolation. Isolation is imposed from without. It's a cutting off, a rejection. Solitude, on the other hand, is chosen from within. It's a positive state, not a negative one. And here's the paradox. It's only when you're truly comfortable being alone that you can have genuine relationships with others. You see, when you need other people to complete you, to make you feel whole, to give you a sense of identity, your relationships become transactions. You're using people to fill a void, and they're using you to fill theirs. There's a kind of desperation to these connections, a clinging quality, and this is what passes for love in our society, this mutual dependence, this shared fear of being alone. But when you're genuinely complete in yourself, when you've learned to be at peace in your own company, then your relationships become something entirely different. They're no longer about need. They're about choice, about genuine appreciation.